to their futures. Soldiers speak out. 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 We can tell the truth of what we've seen. We are not liars. Soldiers speak out. We have a duty to all children and to their futures. Soldiers speak out.
And I'm with Veterans for Peace, Chapter 109, the Rachel Corrie Chapter in Olympia, Washington. And this is the Veterans Hour. We are starting a very special series called Soldier Stories, Path to Healing and Return. Soldier Stories is a series of programs produced by our chapter and offers veterans the opportunity to tell their stories, some for the first time, to speak about their combat experience and how that experience has and continues to influence their lives. Equally important, Soldier Stories informs our viewers about what our nation asks when it sends men and women into combat. Our viewers will learn about the choices humans must make in war, and they will learn that war actually comes home after the guns fall silent. And my co-host is Mark Fleming. Mark?
And the reason we started this series is that the veteran is forever transformed by war. This transformation is often destructive to the individual, to his loved ones, and the society to which the veterans return, and the society that has ordered the veteran to make that sacrifice. Dr. Edward Tick, author of War and the Soul, describes the combat experience as a spiritual wound that heals with difficulty. Dr. Tick teaches that the veteran's story is an important step in healing that wound. Veterans need to tell their stories, and civilians need to listen.
And tonight I want to introduce the people in our roundtable here who will be sharing. And I'm going to start off in the far end here. Wes Hamilton. Wes Hamilton served in the Marine Corps in Vietnam. Wes?
Yeah, I was in Vietnam from 1966 to 1967 for 13 months.
And you served in the?
I served in the I Corps area, which is up north towards the DMZ, to the west of the Da Nang, and I was with the 3rd Amtrak's attached to the 2nd Battalion, 5th Marine in Anhua.
Okay. Welcome. We appreciate you being here to share your story. And next to him is James Breitmun, although I call you Jim most of the time. And Jim was a combat medic in Iraq. Jim?
Yes, thank you, Dennis. I was like you said, a medic in the Army. Served in Iraq from 2004, 2005, stationed in Samarra, Iraq. I was attached with the 369 Armored Cavalry Division. Yeah.
Welcome, and we're glad that you're here to tell your story. And Judith Buffew is not a veteran, but she is here for a very special purpose. And we found that when soldiers tell their stories, sometimes it becomes a very intense experience. Judith is a licensed therapist, counselor, who has dealt and worked with veterans before. And we've asked her to join us so that in the process of sharing, if we should ask a question and it causes any discomfort to where sharing the story it becomes a difficult thing, we've asked Judith to to step in and be that gentle voice that helps us in this process.
Thank you, Judith.
And welcome. I'm going to start off, Wes, with you. How and why in the world did you enter the armed services?
I usually, when people ask me that question, as I jokingly say, well, I was born and raised in Kansas, thinking that should be a sufficient answer by itself. And it's true to a great extent, because I was raised in the Midwest. I was raised. I was born in the late 1940s, and so I was growing up in the Midwest through the 50s and the early 60s, and there was and there still is a very distinct value there that says that being in the military and military service is almost an expectation in many ways, because it's kind of like more or less a coming of age kind of thing for a lot of young men, and particularly young men at the time. And there are other complicating factors. There's always a woman involved. I had a girlfriend that she and I were trying to decide what to do with our lives, and we're breaking up, and I wanted to take the initiative to prove to her that I was the man that I hoped that she wanted to have in her life. And also, as I said, I was in Kansas and wanted to escape, and so that was another means to do that. And add to that the possibility of education and all kinds of things.
So you enlisted then? You weren't drafted?
I did. I was facing the draft. Most people of my age were at the time. I was 18 years old. I graduated from high school. I was looking to the prospect of probably getting drafted, and for me, enlisting was kind of a way to sort of take control over my own destiny in a very small way. And I chose the Marine Corps just as much because of the fact that the Army seemed too bland for me, and there's all this romantic mythology associated with the Marine Corps. And
now you understand that you're surrounded with veterans from the U.S. Army.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Not all of us could be Marines.
Right. Well.
Or wanted to.
But remember, the key word was mythology associated with the Marine Corps.
Yes.
But yeah, that was a big factor. I was caught up in the romance and the propaganda that was pretty common back in the 1950s in the United States.
Well, then we switched to an all-volunteer Army where we pick up Jim. And Jim, you had a choice. How and why did you enter the armed services?
Can I use the excuse as well that I was from the Midwest? No.
We have a Midwest theme going here.
Right.
Okay.
I'm from the Midwest.
Yeah, I was born and grew up in Texas and as well lived in Wisconsin, but no, that's not really why I did it. I guess it was, for me, there was multiple reasons. I had a really, really rough childhood, and extremely abusive uncle that I lived with. He was out of the Air Force, retired veteran of the Air Force, and he told me time and time again when I was growing up with him that I'd never make anything of myself. I'd never accomplish anything, and the military seemed like a good way to prove that I could do something bigger than myself, and there was that. There was a sense of patriotism. I mean, I joined my senior year in high school in '92. I was right around the Desert Storm time period. It just seemed like the right thing to do. I looked at it for a sense of adventure, go places that I probably wouldn't otherwise be able to travel and see. I was at that point I was a ward of the state, and I was running in the foster care system, and so yeah, it provided me with means, and it seemed appropriate.
So
the Army then became your family.
Yeah. Yep.
So in both cases, you were escaping something, getting away from something that you'd been experiencing.
Escaping, and yeah, I felt like I had something to prove.
Now, Wes chose the Marine Corps. You chose the Army.
There is a specific reason why I chose the Army, and it's comical, and it would hold true to this day. It was the only branch of the service that didn't have a swimming requirement. I sink like a rock, so yeah.
And now you live by the waterfront.
I
That's
live
sort
by,
of the irony
right,
of it
right.
all.
But I've been taking swimming lessons, and I at least know, hopefully enough to save my life if it ever came to. So.
And did you start out as a medic?
No, I enlisted under the infantry as an infantryman, and went down to Fort Benning, Georgia for my boot camp. It's the home of the infantry. And I was young and dumb in high school. It seemed like the thing to do. I joined with two other friends of mine, and you know, Wisconsin, where we were living, you know, deer hunting was huge, and you know, the bigger the guns that we could play with, you know, the more fun.
So it was
would
truly
be.
an adventure.
Definitely.
How old were you?
17.
You were 17. Yeah.
And you were 18?
18, right. Yeah.
And that's pretty typical, is it not?
I think so. I
Yeah,
know that,
I would.
Yeah.
I would say most people that I went to boot with were right around 17 to 19 years old. Yeah.
Now, you served how many years then, Jim?
14 years.
14 years.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
14 years. And you switched to MOSs then?
Yeah. Prior to my deployment to Iraq, I won. At that point, we were entering into the second year in the Iraq War, and I started doing, I guess, my own homework. And at that point, and still to this day, there had never been any weapons of mass destruction found, and that was the whole reason for us going to war. So I for one didn't believe in what we were doing over there, occupying Iraq. So I had a real tough time looking at. I was an infantry squad leader at this point, and I had a real tough time looking down my line of 13 infantrymen and feeling that I would have to lead them into something that I didn't believe in. And I had experience in the emergency medicine field, and I felt I could better serve providing.
In your civilian background, you had emergency?
Because at this point, I was the reserves, and I was a civilian paramedic. So.
And
I have a question.
You have a question. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Judy.
I may not be a veteran of military service, but I'm a veteran of life, I can tell you that. And I don't know what MOS is.
Okay, very good.
Military occupational
status.
specialty.
Military occupational
it's your job
Specialties.
code.
specialty.
What you do.
Oh.
So like
It's your job, basically.
infantry was 11 Bravo, medic was a 91 Whiskey.
In the Marine Corps medic area, we don't have medics, we have corpsmen, they're naval personnel. But 0311 was the infantry, and 1822 was.
And
I see.
when you joined, Jim, were you planning to make a career of it? Or
Definitely.
To stay in that long?
Yeah, definitely. I felt after I had reached like my 9-year mark, I was like, I'm gonna make a career of this. I truly did find a family. I found camaraderie that I haven't really found anywhere else, except that the closest I've come to that is the fire department that I was on for a while. But again, we're under the same type of stresses, but I mean, I found like a family, and that was the toughest part of leaving the service was, leaving these brothers of mine. But yeah, I definitely thought that I was going to make a career of it, and it wasn't until my deployment to Iraq that my mind was changed.
And we'll come back to that in a little bit. Wes, you didn't go in thinking it was going to be a career choice for you, or not?
No, I volunteered for the draft, basically. And it was, at the time, the Marine Corps was the only organization that was not participating in the draft. If you were drafted, you automatically went into the Army. But they had implemented a new program where if you volunteered for the draft, you could pick your choice of service. And so I volunteered for the Marine Corps because everybody else was getting 2 years or 4 years, and I would be able to go in and do it for 2 and essentially accomplish the same thing that everybody else got away with. But when I graduated from boot camp, and I got my orders to go to Vietnam as an infantryman, I decided to see what the options were, and I extended for a year. and I got to pick armor, or got to pick my choice of specialty.
So by extending, you could change your MOS
Right.
from an infantryman to
armor person.
to armor.
But the benefit of that again was I was still a year less than what everybody else was who had enlisted and was serving. And as it turned out, I was when I got back from Vietnam, I served for 18 months, and then they discharged me.
So your total time in the service was
2 years, 10 months, and 21 days.
But who's counting, right?
Right.
Yeah. And your experience was 14 years or so?
14 years, exactly.
14 years. Now, Mark, although you're co-hosting, you were drafted after college, correct?
Well, actually, I volunteered.
You
I
volunteered,
volunteered for 2 years, figuring, well, I'm a college graduate. I'll just go in, I'll get 2 years out of my way and be done. And then I figured, I should be able to get a good job. Well, they put me in the infantry, 11 Bravo. And I finally did get the good job. I ended up as company clerk. But that was mainly because I'd taken typing in high school. And I could type. And that's what, that saved me. So I spent half my tour behind a desk with a typewriter. It probably wasn't as dangerous as I was with a gun.
In my particular case, you had exactly 4 years to get through college. Exactly 4 years. No excuses. And when I was 6 credits short, I received a notice from the president. It's the only notice I've ever received from the president until Father's Day, just past Father's Day. But it wasn't nearly as threatening as the welcome, do we have a plan for your life and your clothes are taken care of. And so I, rather than be drafted, because they says, do you want to be a Marine officer or an infantry officer? And I says, those are my choices? I don't think so. So I enlisted and became a bandsman in the United States Army band program, and where you had a choice type of thing. And I understand you had a choice, too, by switching. Yeah.
So you were in for 3 years.
I was in for 3 years, actually 2 years and 9 months, because I found that they had great salads, civilian life, that they didn't have in the military. Yeah, so I found it early out to go back to college again.
Yeah, I would like to add that during boot camp, we were all tested to see, they offered me officers candidate school, and I asked them, quite seriously. I thought it was, a fascinating concept, and I hadn't thought about that. And then I said, what's involved? And they said, well, you just have to sign here, and I said, well, what happens? And they said, well, you have to stay in for 6 years. And I was 18 at the time, and I thought, that's a third of my life. I mean, and it's the only time I really made a rational decision. The whole time I was involved with that was really looking at that, thinking, that's almost forever, and I couldn't see myself doing that.
And even just looking at the 2 years, given what they were offering, it seemed like forever, because it could have been.
Yeah. I mean, it's a long time when you're 18 years of age. It's a long time.
Now, did any of you, Jim or Wes, have any inkling that something is not working for me while I'm in the service? Something might have changed?
For me, I honestly, I would say my first 12 years in the service, things were great. Like I enjoyed doing what I was doing. I was having fun. I was making money. I had my family.
And what was your MOS at the time for those 12
That was
years?
infantry.
Infantry. You're infantry at that time.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was infantry.
And where were you stationed all of those 12 years?
Well, like I said, I ended up going reserves. So, but yeah, it was still very much the same as active. Like the reserve unit that I ended up being assigned with. Like, I mean, we did stuff, during our drill time and our training in the summer, but we'd also meet and do things outside of that as well. So it was like a continual camaraderie, brotherhood. And I say brotherhood because my whole time spent in the military was never with females. Like, I was never, except for the time that I reclassified to medic, and they sent me down to Fort Sam Houston, Texas. That's the only time that I've ever been alongside female soldiers. my time served in Iraq, I was assigned with an infantry line company. I hit boots in the ground, and the commander with the 3rd Infantry Division looked at my record, and they're like, man, 12 years infantry, squad leader, like, you know what you're doing on the front line. We'll take you as a frontline medic, and that's how I got placed where I was at. And,
So then you went through specialized training to be the medic then?
Yeah, down in Fort Sam Houston, Texas, yeah. There's 2 types of medics. We both received the same type of training down in Texas. It's the luck of the draw where you get assigned. Either you're, at a cache, a field hospital or something, or you're on the front line. And because of my infantry background, that's how I got assigned where I was.
Now, most medics are called doc. Were you also called doc?
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, that's a tough one for me. As an infantryman, as well as a medic, like the Army has these medals, the combat infantry badge and the combat medical badge, and you can only earn them, in combat, under fire. It's the only way you can get them, and I remember specifically when I was much younger in the infantry, like, that was the token, like the combat infantry badge, the
wanted that.
the
That was
the
CIB,
goal.
that was what you needed, and I still remember, when we were deploying, the infantry guys that I was training with, that was their goal, the CIB. They're finally going to get a chance to, to possibly get this badge, and for me it was the combat medical badge. But at this point, I was at a different level of thinking. I mean, I deployed over there when I was in my early 30s, so I'd experienced life. I wasn't 18 years old, and I guess I was a little bit more wise, but still, yeah. Earning that title, Doc, to go back to your question, that comes. It's highly revered title. Yeah, you're really respected, I guess, when you earn that.
Mm-hmm.
And I earned it taking our very first casualty, my first beacon in Iraq. So, we had an infantry squad leader that was hit by a roadside bomb. I was 3 back from him.
Three people back?
Yep, 3 people back, right behind our platoon leader. Went off, blew me to the ground. I was dazed. And like I said, we were our first week boots on the ground doing a night foot patrol. And yeah, that burns in my mind today. Like, I was dazed, but I remember just hearing the screams, medic, medic.
How prepared were you for that event? Did you have any type of training that would prepare you for what you went through?
No, I was a civilian paramedic for a good number of years, and I had seen some ugly stuff, some nasty car accidents. Living in Wisconsin, saw some nasty farm implement injuries, factory injuries, stuff like that. I mean, I'd been exposed to blood. But it's different. Combat is definitely different.
It's your family.
Yeah, it's your family. I was the only one there. Like, as a civilian paramedic, you have other crew members. I was the only one there. Like, there's one medic on the patrol. that was it.
And you also have in a position where, I mean, infantry, they say, get down, stay low. You've got to get up and go.
Yeah. Yeah, basically run myself into the kill zone because, like, as we soon found out, you know, shortly thereafter, like, once one's gone off, they're setting up another one somewhere. So, yeah, basically you're running into a kill zone. But, yeah, I mean, that was the night that the next day I remember, like, just being a mess after that. Like, couldn't think straight, couldn't sleep. And the next day, I heard it in my ears, you know, Doc, like that's, I had referred, from that day on, it was Doc. My other medic partner, Tim, it was shortly thereafter, you know, they were calling him medic yet, but it wasn't until too long afterwards that it happened to him. And, you know, you start out as medic.
So Doc is a badge
until those
of courage.
infantrymen know that you know your shit and you're not scared to
Put
go
your life
in there.
on the line for them.
Yeah. So it is. It's something that is very sacred to me, but at the same time, you'd wish that you'd never earn it. Same with the CMB. Same with the CIB. You know, I'd throw all that shit back if I could.
Wes, how prepared were you to go into a combat situation as a 18 or 19-year-old?
Yeah, I was 3 weeks into my 19th year when I hit boots on the ground in Vietnam. And how I ask, you know, young people these days, you know, or I asked my kid, you know, what were you doing when you were 19? You know, because I don't think anybody really thinks about they're prepared for anything like that when they're 19 years of age. And you know, watching John Wayne charging up San Juan Hill certainly, or Mount Suribachi and Iwo Jima isn't the same. You know, it's and those guys get up afterwards, and the wounds are not real. And yeah, so you know, you can't be prepared for it. There's no way. I will say that the things that got me through, probably the same thing for you, was the training. Just, you know, the training, the repetition. And that's what the military is good for, is training you to not think, training you to simply react and do. You do what your training tells you to do. And that's one of the things that the institution of the military is really good at. I wanted to kind of respond to something about, you know, for me, and we've talked about this, but for me, and I'd like to get your thoughts on it too. I'm 5 different people. Then over the course of my life, you know, there was the me before I went into the Marine Corps. I was a kid from Kansas and was incredibly, you know, naive, and then I went in the Marines. And when you go through that process and go through the boot camp and go through the early parts of the training, it changes you, and you can't go back to be that person that you were before. You've lost that child. Then when I went over to Vietnam, I was deployed, and it really doesn't matter. Anytime you get into the institution of the military, you get that family. You become a part of that institutional process, and again, it changes you into a different kind of person because it becomes a lifestyle, and you can't go back. And then when you're in combat, that changes you in ways that nobody prepares you for that, and nothing that you can ever in life will ever be the same ever again. And again, you can't go back. You're in that place. But then the one person that you become that a lot of people never think about is when you come home, and your family sees that person that was the person they knew before, and you're never going to be that person again. And they'll never see that person again. And they expect you to be, you know, back to normal, back to who you were, and be able to live life in the world that you're in with them. And for me, one of the most difficult things to do was to it was like I was acting in a part. I was trying to live in a play. That I was trying to live a role that somebody else expected me to be in, and it wasn't. I couldn't ever be that character ever again. So I was kind of like I was always trying to live up to somebody else's expectations of what I should be, knowing that that was a lie. It was a complete fabrication. And as a, you know, just for me, it's like letting the world know that that person is not the same person, and try to get to know them and try to understand them, and be, I guess, sensitive to the fact that they'll never be there again, ever. I don't know if you felt anything like that.
I totally agree with everything that you had said. The different changes, the different beings of who you are and what you're becoming. And you're right. Like, when I came back, I think my family and friends expected me to eventually transition, you know, be who I was before I went over, and I remember them, you know, continually like trying to help me get back there, but it wasn't me. It wasn't me no longer, I guess. Like, that was, somebody who I once was.
I wanted to ask you, did either of you expect to be the same person you were when you came back?
I'd never thought about it.
I mean, yeah. So you didn't really know that you had this transition, at least not until later on as you started living it.
No, I couldn't say that I had expected it.
I mean, again, I was a naive kid from Kansas, and I had no expectations. I mean, you were talking about the fact that you were good with what the military had been for you during the first part of it, and for me, you know, what I had stepped into was no different from what I expected, getting into the military, but the romance of what combat is all about is nothing that anybody can prepare you for.
Let me throw out a challenging question which you can pass on or whatever, but consider, what happened to you while you were in the service that forever changed you? You both have said, I was changed as a result of what I went through. What can you share with us that really forever changed you?
I don't know, Dennis, if there's... I don't know. I don't think there's a particular thing, like particular event. I think my entire combat tour, I guess, forever changed who I am. Definitely changed my view and opened my eyes to the military, the Army. I thought I was gonna go 20 and be done, but I could not be part of something that I did not agree with, you know. Like, I was seeing firsthand, like, this chaos and destruction and loss of life, and yeah, I would say, I don't know if there's a particular event. I mean, there's a lot of events that I experienced, but I would say that it's my combat tour. Like, I was pretty content up until my combat tour, and like I said, I came out no longer agreeing with the uniform that I wore, and I couldn't be part of it any longer.
But you also had something as a combat medic that you dealt with not only those who were in the armed services, but you came across civilians who needed medical assistance too, and I know that profoundly affected you. I've heard you share that before.
Definitely changed me. I mean, because of, you know, our invasion, they have, where I was stationed anyway, Samara, they had no medical, you know, support for the civilians. You know, the hospitals were abandoned, you know, are a complete disarray. So civilians couldn't get any medical help. The Iraqi security forces that the infantry company that I was with were training, they had no medical support in their military structure at this point, and so yeah, I was not only responsible for U.S. and coalition forces, but Iraqi security forces as well as civilians, and the majority of blood on my hands is from civilians.
From treating civilians.
Treating civilians as a direct result of us being there. We would have car bombs, IEDs trying to target us, and there would be civilians, caught in the crossfire, to say, and they had nowhere to go, and no help, and I'd go out there and be with them, and that was not easy. I didn't know these people, but they were humans, and but I did know these people, though. I just said that I didn't, but my entire 14 months there, there was this corner as we left our patrol base. Every single patrol that we went on, we had to cross this corner, to enter the city, basically. The main downtown city of Samara. And every single time that we went out on patrol, there was a little girl that came out waving, If we were in Humvees, she came out waving. She'd run out of her house waving. We were foot patrol. We'd still round the same corner. She'd come out, Mister, Mister. And as a medic, I had a lot more flexibility, like, talking with people. I'm supposed to be scanning my sectors, but bullshit, who does that as a medic? I wasn't there to, swing my weapon, this and that. That's why I transitioned to medic, but I was assigned with the infantry company. I was still supposed to be, a good line medic, and I was an infantryman just carrying more stuff. But anyways, there's a little girl I befriended, saw her almost every single day. My last week in Iraq, I'd gave her color crayons, coloring books, whatever people sent me in the mail, I'd hand off to her pens, pencils. She loved it. She was the sweetest little girl, 5 years old. My last week there, we were doing changeover, and it's called right seat ride, something like that. New company comes in, and we train them in the operations, and we went out on a mounted patrol in the city in Humvees. Rounded that quarter, V-bed hit us. The little girl, gone. She came out to wave.
To her
I
friend.
knew these people. Fuck.
And that has profoundly influenced you now,
Definitely.
understandably so.
It's affected me in every way.
Because you still see that little girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see a lot of faces. I may not know names, but I see the faces.
Wes, do you have similar type of memories or things that you still see 30 years later?
I was basically taught to, and I think it's interesting. I was taught to hate the Vietnamese. I was taught to that they were before I went over. Part of my training was basically to instill in me a belief that there was nothing of quality. And actually, at one point in time, I was told that, interestingly enough, by a priest, that it was okay to kill them because they didn't believe in the Scripture, and they didn't believe in Christ, and they were essentially not, qualified to be recognized as people in the eyes of God. And I was given every moral tool to basically dehumanize them. And I think it was interesting that when I got there, we were in South Vietnam, and I was really conflicted by the fact that weren't these the people that we're supposed to be protecting, but at the same time, these are the people that we are, treating as if they're the enemy. And it was like I was taught, don't trust any of them. It's them and us, and that the only people that you can trust are the people that are in your own unit. That my primary job was to protect myself and the other people in my unit. And I never considered myself a racist, but I am, because I was taught that that's exactly what I was supposed to be. And it's instilled in me a major, conflict in that I've never been able to fully reconcile. I'm proud of the fact that I've raised my children not to be that way. It's been something that I've struggled with, to make sure that that wasn't something that I passed on to them. But another thing too that changed me was understanding what fear is, and basically moving. I can't say moving beyond it, because you never really do, but learning to live with it, learning to not let it stop me. And becoming numb. And that was one of the big things that happened to me. It was I became really numb to a lot of the things that were going around me. I stopped feeling a lot of things around me, just because it was the safest way to be, the safest way to just tolerate the situation, be completely numb and insensitive to what was going on. If I felt any kind of an emotional attachment to anything, it was so easy to lose control of myself and the situation, and not only put me at risk, but also the people that I served with, and that was they're my family, and so I had a responsibility to them to always be in control, and that meant, especially when I was the crew chief on my Amtrak, I was responsible for them, and that meant basically pushing all feelings down as deep as they could possibly go, and not letting them, not touching them at all.
That brings up a point. Jim and Wes, what is it that makes it so hard for us as veterans to tell our stories? Some, perhaps we never do tell stories. World War II vets rarely have told their story. And I know Judith and I have been part of, and Mark too, part of Veterans Advocacy, where we talk to various people, but there are people that never get to tell their story or have a hard time doing it. What is it that makes it difficult for us as veterans to tell our stories? Because telling stories is part of the path to healing, but that's still difficult.
Well, I guess, it's tough to tell the stories. It's easy for me to bury them, I guess, because if you tell the story, then you have to live that again. Yeah, it's easier to keep it dark and hidden. There's a lot of things that I'm not proud of. Certainly, it's like airing out your dirty laundry.
I think you both brought out a point that's really important in the combat experience, is you really have to look at the other people as inhuman. So Wes was taught, to dehumanize them, to stop all the feeling.
The military still does that, though. I was taught the same thing.
But you didn't follow that because you established that relationship with the little girl, and suddenly it put a human face on the war, which makes it very difficult to keep doing what you're doing.
It is very tough. It's very tough. It's very tough when I myself was seeing these people as humans, and I'm serving with 150 infantry guys that aren't necessarily seeing them as
thinking
human.
like Wes was thinking.
Yeah, Like, who gives a shit? Let's kick in their door. Like, who cares if it's bad entailed? We're going to kick in their door and ransack their house. You know, point guns at them. You know, who's the tough guy here? So, yeah, the military still does a very good job at that. But
Yeah.
I guess some people like myself slip through the cracks. But I think it's just because of my years already living life that put me in a different mindset than the typical 19-year-old infantryman that I served with.
Wes, did you come to that realization while you were in the service at all, or did you?
Well, I want to go back to the question about why do we not tell our story, and I think a lot of it is that there's a lot of shit you really don't want to know. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that in this country, the American people are very happy to be inside their little comfort zone, knowing that there's a lot of stuff that they don't need to know about. You know, if we were to tell them the truth of the things that they were responsible for by sending us over there, you know, we probably wouldn't be there. But they don't want to hear that, and it's really hard to tell that story because the people that you can trust are your family, and those are the last people that you want to hurt with the things that you know that you've seen and done. And then there's another thing for me, and that is that I've had to confront the fact that I've engaged in things that are absolutely, completely contrary to every moral value that I've been taught is correct, and they are a violation of my own moral code. And how can I admit that? By telling you about that, how can I accept that part of myself, that this is a part of my character that is a failure to me? It's a flaw in me, and telling a story that involves, you know, sharing that is it's tearing me down inside myself. You know, I don't know if that makes sense or not.
It makes perfect sense.
Totally.
Yes.
I think you said you have to relive it.
But I don't ever want to relive that.
Yeah.
I don't ever want to relive that, and I don't want anybody else to have to live it. What I want to do is stop you from having to live it yourself. I mean, and you know, yeah. What was your other question?
Well, I mean, the question was, while you were in the combat experience, did you ever come to see the Vietnamese as human?
No, never. While I was there.
I mean,
one of the big things that did change me, which was really quite helpful, I have to say, in the long run, was being in a situation where you have this group of people that I was in the Marines with, in an outpost, really isolated, and you know, having to basically deal with each other. I was a kid from Kansas, and this was my first exposure to people outside of my own little, you know, community, and getting to know kids who were surfers from California, and kids from Texas, and kids from Georgia, and kids from Chicago, and places around that I had could never have imagined ever experiencing. This was my exposure to a world outside of the one that I grew up with, and becoming fascinated listening to them tell about their lives and where they lived allowed me to begin to see a world bigger than the one that I had grown up with, which gave me the chance to begin to ask questions about, well, why are we here and what are we doing? And it was while I was in Vietnam I started examining some of the politics. I didn't even know what politics was then, you know, but examining some of the politics of it. And it was by the time I actually got home was when I actually started realizing things weren't the same that I believed in. And had I have stayed over there a few more months, I probably would have reached a point where I was able to look at the Vietnamese in a different way. But at the time I left, I was still very caught up in the military's vision of what they needed from me. You know.
Do you carry that same vision today? Or
Oh no.
No, that's what I thought.
I did have some conflicts at the time, but no.
What do the American people need to hear to understand your
Which
story,
part?
your pain?
I'm not sure I understand the question. What do they need to, which part of it? What do they need to hear is that we should never put young people in that situation. That we're destroying lives by putting people in places where they have to hate to be able to to accomplish what it is that they're being told that they need to accomplish, and they'll never be able to come back from that. And that if you
And be
really
the
care about
same.
somebody, don't ever put them in that position.
Right.
You know.
Now, both of you are doing something radically different now as a result of your service. And I know both of you are associated with Coffee Strong, Iraq Veterans Against the War, Veterans for Peace. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing now as a result of your experience in combat.
I'm remodeling Wes's bathroom.
Well, that's another form of combat.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Seriously, it's very therapeutic.
Well, I came back. I've always enjoyed the emergency medicine side. I've always enjoyed helping people. And I felt like I was pretty damn good at emergency medicine. But I came back, rejoined the civilian ambulance, and I learned quickly that I could no longer do it. So I moved out to Washington, went to school, and now working as a carpenter.
And graduated just
Graduated.
recently
Yes.
from the Evergreen State
Evergreen.
College.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yes, congratulations. I was there at your graduation ceremony. And you also volunteer at Coffee
Yes,
Strong,
I
a GI
volunteer
coffee
at-
house.
Yeah, I volunteer at Coffee Strong.
It's a crucial thing everyone should have on their resume as being a barista
Yes.
these days.
We have about 5 minutes left in our program. Time really goes by
does.
on
Yeah.
this one.
Yeah.
But I'd like us to really just quickly tell us what we're doing now as a result of our experience, and also what you would like our viewers to know about yourself and the armed services. If we could sort of tie that up in a couple of minutes apiece.
I'm getting ever since I got out of the military, I've been basically trying to connect with veterans to try and find ways for them to know that they had someone that shared their experience, that they could, I don't need for them to tell their stories, but just know that there are people who would understand their story if they felt they needed to talk about it. And then what I would like for people to know is that the military changes people in ways that you can't recover from, and that I think that we really need to realize that it's not the mythical great warrior place that we've created so much of a placed on such a high pedestal of prestige in our society. It's not the kind of rite of passage that a person needs to have to go through. That there are other ways of public service that don't involve going into the military, and that I would really encourage people to try and explore other ways of public service, and that the military is by far the last choice that I would encourage people to think about.
Thank you, Wes. Jim?
I guess as far as what I'm doing as a result of my service is I'm just trying to, I don't know, I guess some days it's just trying to get by day to day. I'm, trying to get myself, I guess, better. It's tough for me. It's a battle because, like I said, I've always enjoyed helping people medically. And, shortly after I got back, I ran into a buddy of mine that was over there, and he came up to me. He's like, "Doc, I'm not doing good. What do I do?" I'm like, "I don't know what to do. I don't even know what to do myself. I'm just as, messed up from this as you." And I couldn't help him. So I guess, I'd love to be able to return to helping veterans. And I guess in a small way, my presence at Coffee Strong, hopefully contributes to that. But it's not easy for me to do that full-fledged right now.
I want to tell our viewing audience that Coffee Strong is a GI coffee house just outside the borders of Joint Base Lewis-McChord, where we offer coffee and internet services, and I know that you two are involved with it, and all of us are involved with that, and it provides an opportunity to speak with present-day service people and to hear their stories and to give them some information that they otherwise might not have. Also, just in closing, Mark, why don't you do a little plug for veterans advocacy?
That's right, because we now provide at Coffee Strong every Friday from 10 to 2, we have veterans advocates. And veterans advocates are people who are trained in veterans law and procedure and will assist veterans and active duty service members in pursuing the benefits that they've earned, educational, medical, disability, a wide variety. So it gives an opportunity for us to give back to veterans and help this current generation.
I want to thank you, Wes. Thank you, Jim and Judith, for being here in our roundtable for our very beginning of Soldier Stories, Paths to Healing and Return. Our hope is to have as many veterans as we can find tell their stories so that it'll be on the path to their healing, but also help our viewing audience know what it is that we expect when we send men and women into a combat situation. We want to thank TCTV for providing the studios for us. We're on Channel 22 on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. and on Fridays at 9 p.m. And then later on, we're also on the internet on Blip TV. And when the credits roll, you'll see our website. But want to thank each of you and our viewing audience. Thank you.
Soldiers, speak out. We have a duty to all children and to their future.